Let us focus on this geometrical aspect of perturbation. Okay. So as you know, we started from a homogeneous and isotropic universe for which the metric was given by G mu nu equals kappa T mu nu. Okay. And right now, since we are doing inflation, this T mu nu is now given by a scalar field phi. Okay. And this G mu nu is what you get. From here you solve and you get a T which is of the order of super exponential nature. Okay. Okay, great. And now your job is to explain that somehow you have perturbation in T mu nu. So that is what I reserve for the next class, what I will discuss during quantum fluctuations. That this quantum fluctuations of inflaton will actually give rise to classical perturbations. Okay. So somehow you have fluctuation in T mu nu. So you have kappa del T mu nu on the right hand side. Okay. So if you want to match it with left hand side, then you can say that your G mu nu is also perturbed. Okay. So you can say that G del G mu nu equals kappa del G mu nu. Okay. So this was true for initial homogeneous and isotropic universe, and this equation is responsible. So what is our job basically? When we are interested to study the homogeneity and isotropism, like when we are going to study the inflation right now, okay, so we will focus on these equations, G mu nu equals kappa T mu nu. But when we are interested in studying perturbations, then instead of dealing with this equation, we will try to get first order fluctuation of these equations and relate them. Okay. And this equation will govern your initial inhomogeneities which are being generated. Okay. So now our primary target is to do this thing, that given a G mu nu and T mu nu, we know what is T mu nu, we know what is G mu nu already. Okay. T mu nu is given by inflation and this is given by T. Okay. So given this thing, you take first order fluctuations and you equate them and expect physics out of that. Okay. It's just the same mechanical procedure. Okay. But in course of doing so, you will extract physics out of that. I will show you how.
Sir, while considering the first order fluctuation, we actually basically pose that the fluctuations die out with the
No, fluctuations don't die out, but whatever fluctuations you have, they are pretty small compared to your background. They are pretty small compared to your background. And this is quite consistent. Why I am considering this thing first and foremost? This is quite consistent with observation, because as I said, the CMB sky, what does it say? CMB sky basically states this thing, that this sky is more or less homogeneous and isotropic. You can see 2.73 can be at all directions. Whatever inhomogeneities you have, that is pretty small amount. That is pretty small. Okay. So that's why you can say first order fluctuation of that thing, your background is perfectly homogeneous and isotropic, and you can expand it, okay, and take just the first order fluctuation, which will serve the purpose. You are not bothered about higher order perturbations. Okay. So what you do now? So is the point clear to everybody? Okay. So what you have to do is to find out del G mu nu separately, del T mu nu separately, and equate them to extract out physics. Okay. So it has got two steps. Okay. First and foremost, we will focus on calculating del G mu nu. Is the point clear? So this basically takes care of the pattern geometry, and this takes care of the pattern matter. We will pattern geometry separately, we will pattern the matter separately, and then we will have to equate, because as we know, we are basically expanding G mu nu and we are taking turn to turn, we are equating them. So first order fluctuation here, we are equating them. Background and background we equate, that will basically give you homogeneous classification. Okay? Fine. So let us now calculate, basically. So let us calculate pattern geometry, del G mu nu. Except this calculation is rigorous, so let's see how far can go. Okay, please hold on, because this calculation is really difficult. So as I said, don't try to understand every point, just try to have the basic essence. Okay. So before doing this, okay, so let us discuss a few points. First and foremost, an essential issue while deriving del G mu nu, while deriving the pattern geometry, an essential issue which you have to take care is the gauge ambiguity. What does it mean? Here, As you know in electrodynamics as well, in electrodynamics if you choose say Coulomb gauge, then your calculations are much simpler. Okay. So what does a gauge choice mean? Gauge choice means you choose a specific condition under the assumption that you don't lose any physics. Okay. Only thing is that your calculations are much simpler. Okay. Here also you will have to take care of this thing, because unless you do that thing, your calculations are really complicated. Okay. So first and foremost thing is that you have to take care of this gauge choice. Okay. But there are two prescriptions. Okay, let me just tell you. First and foremost point is that either you choose a particular gauge. Why I am telling you this thing? Because if at all anybody is interested in doing these calculations and everything, okay, and if you go back and try to say refer to any text, then if you have three textbooks completely give you three different results. Intermediate results, final results are all the same because all the final results are consistent. Okay, but intermediate results are completely different and you just get mixed up. Why this happens to be so? Because different textbooks follow different notations. Okay, different methods, so to say. What are the methods? The most important method is either you choose a particular gauge and calculate. Just like what you do in electrodynamics, you choose Coulomb gauge and you calculate. You put that constraint over here and you do calculations. Okay? Or what you can do is that instead of choosing a particular gauge, you define gauge invariant quantities first of all. You choose some quantities which are already gauge invariant. Okay, so you define gauge invariant quantities and then calculate their form. Is the difference clear to everybody? Okay? So there are two methods. Some of the books they follow books or references, whatever you call it. Okay. Some of them follow this method and some of them follow this method, and the intermediate steps are completely different. You cannot have one-to-one correspondence between them. Final result is all that matters. Okay. So when you refer to a book or literature, whatever you call it, okay, you'll have to take care of, keep in mind this phenomena that what they are doing, either they are choosing a particular gauge and calculating, or they are choosing basically a specific gauge invariant quantity and they are calculating. It happens to be shown that this method basically, this second method basically gives you more physical insight to the scenario. I'll explain why. Okay. So this basically gives you more physical insight. So that is why I am trying to focus on this method. Okay. So I will define, so right now what I will do is that to make our life simple, I will basically incorporate some gauge choice, but not by this method, but by this method. Okay. So I have these equations. I will choose some gauge invariant quantities and deal with those quantities which will in turn give you physical insight. Okay. And that will of course make our life simple in calculations. Even after doing all the simplifications, your life is complicated. Okay. So what do you do? So what you are doing, I have already told you what you are doing is that, so you need to calculate del G mu nu, right? If you want to calculate del G mu nu, then what you need to know, suppose you wanted to calculate G mu nu, you go back to your GR class. Okay. First, even before that, G mu nu, small G mu nu, first and foremost small G mu nu. Okay. So here also what you do, if you want to have delta capital G mu nu, then you need to define first of all delta small G mu nu. Okay. So what you do is that you started with initial homogeneous and isotropic universe, okay, for which you had G mu nu bar. So bar means this is perfectly homogeneous isotropic, unperfect, okay. And you consider small fluctuations delta G mu nu. Okay, okay, you will confirm the time and everything that has been discussed. Okay, delta G mu nu. So this is your unperturbed metric. This is your unperturbed metric, and this is small fluctuations. Why small? Once again, I have already discussed why small, because my observation basically tells you whatever fluctuations are there, they are pretty small compared to the homogeneous and isotropic. Okay, so you consider small fluctuations and define your perturbed metric by this. So from now on, whatever I call bar, that basically means unperturbed background, okay. And whatever I write freely, that basically means this is in part of background. So this is your perturbed metric. Okay. So with this, so if you had this metric, you can write down. So if you had this metric coefficients, then you can write down your metric like d square equals minus dt square plus a square t into 3 space square. Okay, d 3 space square. Or in turn, I mean Sheshaji has already discussed this, or I think Prashun has also discussed this conformal time. Okay. So you already know this conformal time. In terms of conformal time, you can make your metric conformally flat. Okay. So you have an a square eta sitting in outside, and the rest is conformal. Okay. So I am just using that prescription. I am using, instead of t or theta phi, I am using eta or theta phi. Okay. So if I do that thing, then this is my G mu nu. You can show that this G mu nu satisfies the matrix which looks like this. This is the d square. So I will have now a perturbed metric, right? Okay, since I am using this perturbed metric coefficients. So d square will be for perturbed metric. Okay. So that basically looks like this is a square with in the outside. In the inside you have minus 1 plus 2a d square plus 2 dy dxi. First of all, what is it doing? Don't get confused with this expression. What is it doing? What was your initial unperturbed? So let me write it down over here. Okay, that will make your life simple. So for G mu nu bar, your metric was d square equals a squared eta minus d eta squared plus okay dxi dxj. Okay, this was your metric. When you have only off diagonal components, Ig. Sorry, you have only diagonal components, off diagonal components are gone because of the symmetry of the space time. Okay, so now with G mu nu, the metric turns out to be this. So what happens? There is a fluctuation with theta, okay, which is this. There is a fluctuation with xi, xj, which is this, okay, and there are cross terms in principle as well. So as you know, in principle, you should write this as a 4x4 metric. In principle, all terms may exist, but homogeneity and isotropism guarantees that for this background metric, you have only the diagonal terms. Okay, all the off-diagonal terms is here. So just to keep that generalization, I have taken this metric in such a way that all the terms can exist. Okay, so you can have d eta squared, a fluctuation with that thing, a fluctuation with xi, xj, which is written over here, and then maybe cross terms, which is this. If this turns out to be 0, then you will claim that there is no cross term. Okay, so let us just check. Is it clear? Okay, fine. Okay, so first and foremost, what you have? So, yes? Hij is a fluctuation. This was initially del, sorry, this was del I, right? This was del I. Okay, and see, just like this, it is deviating from 1 due to the fluctuation, due to, so you know, you have this delta G mu nu, okay, that will give you this Hij. Because, and why this is Ij? Because this is also a tensorial component, and you have two indices over here. So whatever fluctuation you have, that should be tensorial component. Okay, just like here, this is a scalar component, here this is a vector component, this is a tensor component. Okay, so now let us see, it appears to be so that as if in my theory, if I include perturbation, then it appears to be so that as if we have one scalar, one vector, and 3 tensors, so to say, or 3 by 3, 9 tensors, whatever you call it. This will be 9 tensors. Okay, so now let us see that this is not the case. Since you are doing some gauge choice, this reduces your number of degrees of freedom to some extent. So what is the actual degree of freedom? What is the actual number of scalar degrees of freedom, vector degrees of freedom, and vector degrees of freedom? Okay, so let us first try to find that out. So what we will do is that, so this is one scalar, okay, fine. This is one scalar. You can decompose this Dij in such a way that Di can be written as del IB plus Di bar. I will explain in a minute what does it mean. So as I said, don't try to get every point of it, just try to extract physics out of that thing. Okay, because otherwise you will get confused right now. Okay, and grad I Di bar with this circumstance. So what is this? What does it mean? That whatever vector we see here, that can be decomposed into two terms. What are the physical meanings? That this term is the longitudinal part and this term is the transverse part. Okay. So this vector, whatever vector I see, that can be decomposed into two perpendicular components. Okay. This part is the longitudinal part and this part is the transverse part, with the transverse part having another constraint equation, which is this. Okay. And similarly, yes. Two dimensions. No, I am talking about four dimensions over here.
No, sir. But this decomposition longitudinal and transverse. Transverse can have 3 degrees of freedom.
But you have a constant equation. That's what I say. So actually, you have. So since your I is running from 1 to 3 x, y, z. Okay. So you could have 3 BIs, but there is a constant equation that reduces the degree of freedom to 1, to 2 rather, by 1. Okay. So I will count the degrees of freedom, and that will be very important. Okay, I will count the degree of freedom later. So this is the intermediate step. Okay, and similarly you can decompose the Hij. So you will have to take these steps from me. I am not showing you how you can decompose these things. Okay, so that's why I say just try to have the essence. Okay, you can decompose the Hij in such a way that this can be written as 2C delta Ij plus 2 grad I grad J E plus J grad G1 plus once again, if you count, here is a scalar over here. This quantity is the longitudinal quantity. Just if you compare it with this is the longitudinal quantity, these are transverse parts, and this is basically a special part of transverse, which is transverse traceless. Okay, for the transverse part you have both trace and trace free part. You extract out trace out of that thing, that will give you this, and this will be the traceless part. So this is transverse traceless. So now we are in a position in counting the degrees of freedom, and that is pretty important. Okay, so I'll use that. So how much are the degrees of freedom? Yes. Let us count. Oh, I just erased some parts. So what are the actual degrees of freedom? Is the logic clear why I am doing this thing? Because as we know from the part of metric, it appears that you have only one scalar degree of freedom, okay, and say 3 vector degrees of freedom and 9 tensor degrees of freedom. But this is not actually the case. And unless you can properly count your degrees of freedom, you are not doing correct physics. Okay, so first and foremost, let us correctly calculate the degrees of freedom. Okay. So now we are in a position, since we have decomposed everything explicitly, now we are in a position in counting the perfect degrees of freedom. So altogether, how many degrees of freedom we have? We have, let us calculate, we had one scalar A sitting with d eta square, okay? We have, yes, we have one scalar sitting over there we have one scalar coming out of di, which is b. Okay? We have two scalars coming out of hij, which is c and d. So altogether we have actually four scalars, not one scalar. Okay? So altogether we have four scalars which are a, b, c and e. Okay? Plus how many vectors? Okay. So here, as we know, how many vectors you should have? bi's. I runs from 1 to 3. Okay. So bi should be 3 components, should have 3 components. Okay. But you have a constraint equation sitting over here. So that reduces the degree of freedom by 1. So you have 2 degrees of freedom coming out, 2 vector degrees of freedom coming out of B. And similarly, you have EI, EJ. They are dummy indices. So once again 3. Okay. Minus, since that is transverse, you have a transverse degree of constraint equation over there. So 2 from here and 2 from here. Is it clear? Okay. So you have 4 vectors. 2 bi's plus 2 ei's. Okay. And how many tensors? This is the tensor component explicitly. So this should be 3. Okay. This should be 3, but there is a constraint, transverse stressless. So 2 tensors. So now you are doing correct physics. So explicitly what you can have is this. Explicitly what you can have is, if you consider from the homogeneous and isotropic background, if you consider small fluctuations, then this fluctuation results in 4 scalar degrees of freedom, 4 vector degrees of freedom, and 2 tensor degrees of freedom. Now these 4 scalar degrees of freedom, just to give you the perfect answer right now, these 4 scalar degrees of freedom are basically whatever we see in the form of matter. So whatever we call matter, like our solar system, galaxies, clusters, stars, everything, that is basically made of these 4 scalars. Okay? These tensors, they are what we call gravitational waves. Because as you know, wave-like property is basically given by tension. Okay, so these tensors is whatever we call gravitational waves. Till now we have not yet detected gravitational waves, but we should study it in details because there are lots of experiments going on which are trying to probe gravitational waves. Okay, and they are basically, these vectors, they are basically what B and D, they are basically similar to electric and magnetic fields. Okay, which do not actually appear in C and D. So we'll just neglect this one. Okay. So all I want to say is that if you decompose your matrix, okay, in such a way that you consider small fluctuations from that initial homogeneous and isotropic background, then you will have 4 degrees of freedom, 4 scalar degrees of freedom, which are basically responsible for whatever matter we see today. And you will have 2 tensor degrees of freedom, which are basically responsible for the generation of wave-like property of gravity. Okay, this guarantees a property that is wave-like property of gravity. Gravity is basically propagating through a wave. This guarantees that thing, which is generic in Einstein gravity. If you don't do cosmology as well, if you do say terrestrial objects, then also you can have wave-like properties of gravity. So this is a generic property which you need to study. Okay, right now we are forgetting about this. Okay, so if we are satisfied with this, let us now try to focus on scalars. Okay, so as I said, our primary job is to find out del G mu nu and del T mu nu and then equate them. Right now I am doing del G mu nu, and as it appears from here that studying del G mu nu means studying matter fluctuations and studying gravitational wave fluctuations separately, because matter and wave, they are completely different. Okay, they evolve independently. These modes, they basically evolve completely independently. So what I will do is that I will break delta G mu nu in 2 parts once again. One part is studying matter and another part is studying gravitational waves. Once again, that will reduce my calculations to some extent. That will simplify my calculation. Okay, so the primary target of doing all these things is to simplify your calculations. Okay. So now let us study this scalar modes. And this is where, okay, so let me just write them down. Okay, so as I said, so you actually have 4 degrees of freedom. Okay, fine. So in principle, you should have in your equation 4 unknowns. Okay, so now what you can do is that you can attribute gauge choice at this point, and that gauge choice will reduce your calculations. Okay, how you can do that? I have already told you. Either you can choose a particular gauge and you can calculate, or what you can do, you can define gauge invariant quantities and calculate. So what I will do is that I will define gauge invariant quantities. Okay, so when I do scalar modes, I will define gauge invariant quantities and calculate, and let me define gauge invariant. So out of these 4 quantities, basically I am applying 2 gauge choices. If I apply 2 gauge choices, I will be left with 2 unknowns only. Okay, so I am just playing that right. Okay, so what I am doing is that I am defining 2 gauge invariant quantities. Okay, and those quantities are phi and psi, which are made of, I can write down the explicit expression, but that will, once again, that will puzzle you more. So forget about that thing. They are basically functions of A, B, C, E. Okay. So in general, they are functions of A, B, C, and D. Okay. So if I define 2 gauge invariant quantities, now my Potter metric looks little bit simple. And this metric has been used by Seshadri. If you remember Seshadri's class, he basically told you that there are 2 potential arising in fluctuations, perturbations. Okay. So these 2 are the potentials. They are called Bardeen potentials, just by the name of the inventor. So they just play the role of Newtonian potential. Only difference is that you have 2 potentials right now. Okay. So if you do that thing, you can write down your Potter metric. So whenever I write down d square, I mean Potter metric. Okay. So that Potter metric basically looks like a square eta minus 1 plus 2 psi d eta square plus 1 minus 2 phi okay. You can readily identify this Potter metric with whatever Seshadri has discussed. Okay, can you identify? That this is the metric Seshadri has discussed. So these are the 2 potentials sitting over there. And this is how they originate, basically. My job here is to show you how these quantities basically originate starting from equation. Okay, so this is how they originate in a theory. And at the same time, what I have done is that I had to basically use 4 unknowns, okay? But here I have already made our life much simple. This equation is pretty much simple. As Seshadri has already pointed out, if you put psi equals phi, this is quite similar to Schwarzschild metric. Nothing else. Okay, so your job is more or less simple already. Okay, so now your job is to just try to explicitly find. So given this metric, you can, so once you have this metric, you can readily find out delta G mu nu. Now you can calculate Christoffel symbols, Ricci tensor, Ricci scalar from that, and calculate G mu nu. That will give you delta G mu nu because this is the Potter metric. Okay, clear everybody? Is the logic clear? Okay, so the logic should be clear. I don't need to, you don't need to calculate everything offhand. Okay. So given this metric, this originated from G mu nu equals G mu nu bar plus delta G mu nu. Okay. So now you calculate your Christoffel symbols. You calculate Riemann tensors, you calculate Ricci tensors, you calculate Ricci scalar, and you calculate Einstein tensor. Okay. From that Einstein tensor will contain your perturbed part plus unperturbed part. You subtract out unperturbed part, and whatever you are left with, that is basically your sole contribution from perturbation. Okay. So if you do all these steps, at the end of the day, you can get delta G mu nu. Should I write them down explicitly? Those equations are too complicated. So what do you suggest? Should I write them down explicitly? That's not enough. Okay. So are the steps clear to you? These are the intermediate steps. If I do all those steps, what I get is that you calculate, you can find out delta G mu nu from here. What are they? I'm just scaling them just for simplicity. I'm scaling them with this thing, a square delta G. So 0, 0 component, that is 2 del square phi minus 3h. Okay, so let me just define h. What I mean by h? By h I mean, so by capital H I mean a dot by a, right? So dot was taken in terms of t. But now I am basically using a different time, not for my time. So capital H is with respect to that. So capital H is dA d eta by t. Okay, fine. So this is 3h h phi psi prime Okay. So this is equation number 1.
So pipeline with respect to
Prime, all the primes are with respect to eta. Okay, oh, so, okay, I should have told that thing because while studying inflation I took prime and that was with respect to the inflaton field. Okay, so these are some mixing of indices. So at that time it was with respect to this inflaton field. When I call V prime, that is dV d phi. But here when I say prime for perturbation, it means with respect to this eta. Okay. So this is for delta 0, 0. So what should I get? Delta 0, 0, delta 0 I and delta ij. Okay. This will basically continue. So the second one is delta G 0 I. This is 2 delta I. This is equation number 2 and a square delta ig. Yeah, of course. So in principle, I have kept all those terms, but not B and sorry, not B and D are 0. B i's and D i's are 0. B and D are there because you have actually A, B, C, and D, 4 scalars.
Yeah, that's true, but mentally you are using psi and phi is already there.
Okay, but psi, so that is the expression I did not write here. That is what I say. I wrote psi and phi as functions of A, B, C, and D. So they are actually there. Okay. Okay, fine. But don't bother about what is there, where there is 2, where there is 3. But if you want to calculate, you can calculate offhand. Okay. And if you are at all interested in doing perturbations, then you should calculate it at least once in a lifetime. And believe me, anyone who works on perturbation, he has calculated this thing at least once in a lifetime, including me.
So why have you written del I in case of GIJ?
Sorry?
Why have you written del I in case of
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. This should be delta GIG. This is a typo. Okay, so at the end of the day, what you get, you forget about all these expressions. You forget about the right hand side. You just forget about that thing. Okay, and try to bring home the physics. So what you got? You perturbed your metric and in the product metric you just chose some gain element quantities in such a way that it has got only two variables sitting over there which are nothing but potentials. Okay, and in terms of that potentials I basically written down this delta Gij part for scalars. Okay, so for scalars, so what is my final target? Final target is to take delta Gij and delta Tij and equate them. So for scalars delta Gij part is done, but till now we are just 1/4 way through. Why? Because we need to calculate similar quantity delta Gij for tensors and then delta Tij for scalars, delta Tij for tensors, then only we can equate them. Is the logic clear? So let's just do the second step. So forget about the right hand side, one second, forget about the right hand side. You don't need to bother with that. So what you can convince yourselves is that with this pattern metric, you can in principle calculate your delta Gij for scalars. Okay. What about the tensor? And as I said, these are basically responsible for gravitational waves. So for tensor modes, d squared, as we know, for tensor modes, d squared tensor is how much? For tensor modes, you have only Eij bar, right? Which is associated to your dxi dxj. Can you remember that thing? Hij bar came from, Eij bar basically came from Hij. So which was associated with your dxi dxj. Okay. So d square tensor, that basically turns out to be a square. This part completely remains free. There is no contribution of tensor over here. Okay. There is no cross term at the same time. So all you are left with is del Ij plus Eij bar dxi dxj. That's it. So before calculating, so what you can do once again in principle, what you can do is that given this, you can calculate your Christoffel symbols, just the same prescription. You can calculate your Christoffel symbols, then Riemann tensor, then Ricci tensors, then Ricci scalar, and then Einstein tensor. So that will give you delta G mu for tensors. Okay. But before doing that, let us make our life even simpler. Okay. So how you can do that? So in transverse stressless gauge, as we said, Eij is basically coming from transverse stressless gauge, TT gauge. Okay. So this comes from TT gauge. So in TT gauge, basically, you can write Eij. So this is where physics is involved. So you will have to understand the underlying physics. That is more important than doing all these calculations. Okay. So this is where physics is involved. In TT gauge, you can write down Eij in terms of two components. What are the components? I will explain in a minute. Okay. So let us first of all write them down. Eij can be written as H cross H plus 0, H plus minus H cross 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Where this H cross is basically its transverse part and H plus is basically its traceless part. So you can decompose the transverse part and traceless part further. Okay, as you can check, what is the trace of this metric? H cross H minus H cross 0. So 0, you are left with H plus only. So that basically gives you traceless part and this basically gives you transverse part. Okay, physically what does it mean? Physically this is very interesting because with this separate transverse and traceless part, herein lies the underlying physics. Okay, so just try to understand this point. With this transverse and traceless part, you can write, so what does it mean from mathematical point of view? What does it mean? You can write down Eij in terms of two different functions. Okay, so in general, Hij will be linear combination of both of them. Okay, so I can write that linear combination. So sorry, Eij will be a linear combination of them. I can write that Eij as H plus H cross with, if factors Eij plus do you understand the mathematics? I have explicitly broken Eij in terms of two separate variables. So the general expression for Eij bar is a linear combination of them. I have just writing this linear combination just like this. So these are the two constants. Okay. What are those constants? What are the physical meanings? They are basically the polarization tensors which basically appear due to Thomson scattering between electrons and photons. Herein comes once again Seshadri's lecture. Seshadri finished with polarization and everything. Okay, so where from that polarization basically appeared? They appeared before the scattering surface. As I said, there is scattering between photons and electrons. Okay, photons were not that free that time. And this scattering, if you do Thomson scattering between photons and electrons, that essentially generate polarizations. Okay, so this Eij is basically an effect of that polarization. This can be expressed as two plane polarized lights. Okay, these are two plane polarized lights. Okay, so epsilon Ij can be expressed as two plane polarized lights. So in a sense, gravitational waves that appear as two plane polarized lights. Okay, so this is the underlying physics. So whatever you see gravitational waves, you don't directly detect the gravitational waves, but you detect the polarization modes. Okay, that is the E and B modes what Seshadri was pointing out. So if you measure those polarization modes, you can in turn say that you are basically detecting the gravitational waves. Is it clear? Not too clear. Okay. Okay, so just try to have the essence. Once again I say these things are really complicated and I am skipping lots of steps. So what we can do, okay, fine. So what I want to say is that up to this point is clear. Your Eij, so as I said, given this you could have calculated delta G very directly. Okay, in terms of Eij. What I did instead is that I decomposed Eij further. Okay, so you can understand this point at least. Okay, I have decomposed Eij further and I have written it as linear combination of two separate variables. Okay, so now I put this over here and then I calculate those things. Since these are physical components, I am decomposing these things so that I can extract physics out of it. Okay, so if I do this thing, what I get is that I have, and there is one advantage of doing this. Why I am doing this? First and foremost, if I directly calculate, so let us just point this out. There is another advantage from mathematical point of view. What is the advantage? If I directly calculated d square from here, what should I calculate? Once again, just like before, I should calculate a square delta g 0, forget about a square, delta g 0, delta g 0I, delta g ij. But here, I have broken Eij in such a way that this third line and here this third column and third row, they are 0. So all I need to calculate is only one component of delta G, and that will be sufficient. Okay, if I didn't do that, I could have calculated everything and I could have found that most of them are 0. Okay. So what I have done is that I cleverly put the 0 components over here so that now I can be satisfied with calculation of only one component, and that component is a square delta G Ij. Okay. Don't mix it up with scalar Gij. Okay, this is for tensors. Okay. So a square delta G Ij, if you calculate that thing from here using the same steps, it will turn out to be half delta Ik to H E Kj prime bars plus bar double prime Kj minus So the spatial part only, temporal part is done and the cross part is done. Okay. And if you calculate explicitly, this will give you two components only. Okay. So one is, so explicitly written, this will be a square delta G 1 2. Okay, forget about that thing. terms of H plus and H plus. I don't need to bother about that. So as what I am trying to point out is that since I have expressed Eij in terms of H plus and H plus, I can put that value over here and that will give you explicit expression in terms of H plus and H plus. But forget about that right now. Okay, fine. Okay, so we are halfway through. Some part we understand, some part we don't, but in principle we are halfway through. So what we have done till now, once again let me repeat. Okay, so what we have done, our primary intention is to explain formation of structure starting from notation. Okay, to explain formation of structure, as I said, when you want to geometry, what you need to do is that you need to take small fluctuations of your metric coefficients, and that will basically lead to a perturbed Einstein equation. What is that perturbed Einstein equation? You have delta G mu nu in the left hand side, you have delta T mu nu in the right hand side, so that you can equate that at first order. Okay. So to calculate delta G mu nu, all I have done is that I could have directly calculated and made our life a mess. But instead, what I have done is that I have cleverly chosen some gauge invariant quantities. First of all, I have cleverly found out the perfect exact degrees of freedom of the system. Okay, so that I can decompose them further, I can decompose them into scalar modes, vector modes, and tensor modes. Then I just dropped the vector modes. For scalar modes, what I have done, I have defined gauge invariant quantities, and by defining these gauge invariant quantities, I had basically made our life much simpler. So what I have done is, finally, I have arrived at some expression for delta Gij. Okay, delta G mu nu, so to say, for scalars. Even if that looks really complicated, that is in principle really far more simple than what you could have achieved directly from, without doing all these steps. Okay, this is, up to this point you are convinced, I think. Okay, so similar thing I have done for tensors. For tensors, what I have done is that, first of all, I tried to show that these tensor modes, they can be shown to be a linear combination of two polarized states. One along transverse direction, another along trace-trace direction. Okay, and with this term, you can see that calculating only one delta Ij will be sufficient. I have calculated that delta Ij, which is the spatial part, not the temporal part. Okay, so we are halfway through. Now we are left with calculating the delta T mu nu part, and once again for matter and for gravitational waves, so that we can equate matter with matter and gravitational waves with gravitational waves. Okay. Charge up. Long way to go. Okay. Fine. But as you see, once again, what I am trying to point out. So I am repetitively telling this thing. Don't try to understand every simple calculation. Just try to have the underlying physics. Okay. So try to understand what physics is being behaved. Okay. So that is pretty important rather than doing all those steps. That is more important. And as you see brilliantly, so herein lies the power of human excellence basically. Okay, how brilliantly they tackle these complicated set of equations and make it a very simple set of equation, which is basically known to us. I will show that. Okay. But to arrive at that equation, you will have to derive all these things and you will have to extract this. Okay, unless you do that, you cannot arrive at that equation. That equation is quite known to us, I guarantee. So finally, I will give you a very simple expression. You can be content with that. Okay, fine. Okay, so let me calculate this. Okay, so calculation of delta T mu now. That is basically perturbed matter. I have perturbed the geometry part, now I am perturbing the matter part. Basically, it is just the reverse. First I perturb the matter part, and then because of that the geometry is being perturbed. Okay? So I calculate the perturbed geometry, now I am calculating the perturbed matter. Okay. And this part is quite simple. This part is quite simple. So, ray of hope ultimately, this part is simple. So ut mu nu, as you know, ut mu nu is inflaton. Okay? So you know this T mu nu already? Let me once again write that down. Del mu phi minus G mu nu of del sigma phi plus phi. This is, I mean, quite easy because you know for any field theory, you can take first order fluctuation and you can directly calculate the quantities for first order fluctuation. That is quite easy. You don't need to bother about whatever you have done during geometry. Okay, so that is quite easy. So if you just take first order fluctuations, so that means what you do is that you break T mu nu as T mu nu bar once again plus delta T mu nu, which is of first order. Okay, so this is your T mu nu bar actually.
That should be minus sign in bracket, minus with like I need to subtract it from that.
What did you say? With your previous calculation as well. So there are two notations. Okay, so if you are content with, then it will be minus. Okay, fine. Huh. I mean, during inflation I also used that plus sign over there. So you should be consistent. If you are using minus over here, you should minus over there.
You had mentioned minus sign.
Sorry?
You had put minus sign.
I put?
Last time you had put minus.
Oh, I put minus. Oh, so then. So if that is plus, this is plus. If that is minus, this is minus. Okay, you don't need to bother. Okay. So there are two different notations. Like as you know, eta mu nu can be minus 1, plus 1, plus 1, or plus 1, minus 1, minus 1. It's just that. Okay, whatever you choose. Okay, so if you have this T mu nu, where this T mu nu is your inflaton given by this, then you can take first order fluctuation like this and you can write down del T mu nu directly. What is that del T mu nu? Once again, you will have three components, T00, T0i and Tij. Okay, so that will give you del T00 equals minus phi prime delta phi prime minus a square square. This is equation number 1. I is minus phi prime delta I delta phi. This is equation number 2. Square Dij minus Dij. Okay, this is knowledge. Okay. Once again, don't bother about what is there in the right hand side. Okay, you can in principle write that down like this. So at the end of the day, what you get is that you have got your expressions for del G mu nu and you have got your expressions for del T mu nu. Now you can equate them. But before doing them, once again, before doing that, let us make our life once again a little bit simple. First and foremost, what you can check from here is that there is no anisotropic stress. This is the point Seshadri has mentioned once again. If you can remember, there is no anisotropic stress over here. Okay, you don't have any kind of anisotropic stress. Everything is isotropic over here. Okay, so if you don't have any anisotropic stress in the matter part, what you can conclude is that there is no anisotropic stress in the geometry part as well. Okay, because all you have to do is have to equate del T mu nu with del G mu nu. Okay, so if there is no anisotropic stress at this side, then there should be no anisotropics at this side. Okay, and it basically guarantees that out of those two functions phi and psi del G mu nu, you are left with only one function. This is Seshadri has pointed out. Okay, so you don't have two variables. Your life is even simpler. Okay, so since this guarantees that if you so what is the bottom line? If you fluctuate your inflaton, then this does not result into an anisotropic stress. Everything is isotropic till now. Okay, so if there is no anisotropic stress in the inflaton part, then there should be no anisotropic stress in the geometry part as well. And that basically results in no anisotropic stress means your phi is equal to psi in shear radius. Okay, and already your life is simple. You put phi equals psi over there. You had delta G mu, right? You put phi equals psi equals psi, and you will see that some of the terms will drop, and all the other terms are simplified. Fast and foremost. So all you need to do is to calculate phi from there. Okay, using these set of equations. So you have lots of equations in your hand. So what you can do is that you can, now you are in a position. So now you are in a position. So you have calculated del chi mu nu and calculated del t mu nu, and from then you have simplified your life in such a way that out of two unknown variables, phi and psi, you are just left with one variable which is phi. Okay. So now you do del chi mu nu equals del t mu nu. For matter, what happens is that this will, so you have three equations, right? You have 1, 2, 3 for del t mu nu and 1, 2, 3 for del g mu nu, okay? So you write down your equation number, so I am not writing them down, okay? This will unnecessarily kill some time. Okay, you have all these expressions in your hand, you put those things over here. So you will have equation number 1 for 0, 0, so this is for 0, 0, okay? For 0 I, you will have equation number 2, and for I j, you will have equation number 3. Is the point clear to everybody? Is it clear? Okay. I know it's not clear to everybody, but still, is it clear to the majority? So what I am doing is I am basically, so this is for the scalars, okay? So for scalars right now. So what I am doing is I am just taking del g mu nu equals del t mu nu, okay? And those 0, 0 part will give you two equations. This is del g mu nu, this is del t mu nu. Similarly for 0 I. Now we can play the trick, and that trick is really, really important. That is very crucial. So now you have three equations. You can combine those three equations because, as you know, if you go back to fluid dynamics, so you have little bit knowledge of fluid dynamics, I guess. From your first year BSc course, you have knowledge of fluid dynamics. During fluid dynamics, what happens? If you have a steady fluid, then you have three equations. What are the equations? Can you remember? Euler equation, continuity equation, and Poisson equation. What do you do when you consider fluctuations? Like if you drop a table on the fluid, what happens? There is small fluctuations. You can consider that fluctuations, and those fluctuations will basically give you three fluctuation equations: Potter-Euler equation, Potter-Poisson equation, Potter-continuity equation. Now we can play the trick that these three equations, you can combine these three equations so that this basically gives you a single second order differential equation. Okay, and you just try to solve that single second order differential equation. I am just playing the same trick over here. So the background physics is just the same. Here also you have a fluid, photon virion fluid, okay, which was unperturbed initially. You have just dropped a table. What does it mean? You have fluctuated, you have quantum fluctuations on that inflaton, okay, and that has basically led to three similar equations which are identical to Euler, Poisson, and Laplace. They are not explicitly written over here, but they are identical to those equations. So in principle, you can readily combine these two equations to get a single second order differential equation. Okay, so that is what I am doing. So now I am combining these two equations to, so you can now combine 1 and 3. Combine 1, 2, 3 to get a single second order differential equation, and that equation looks like, once again as I said, don't bother about the intermediate steps right now, okay, try to understand the physics. So that equation looks like, because this equation is really, really important. 2h minus, so there is capital phi and small phi, okay, Capital phi means potential. Small phi means fluctuation in interval. Okay, keep it in mind. This is important. Okay, so now you can guess the solution. I will further simplify this equation. Don't bother. This will look pretty compact. But even at this point, you can extract physics out of that. What is that equation? What are the terms? Let us check. What is this term meant for? Just compare it with, once again with fluid dynamics. What is this term meant for? If you have a single second order differential equation with complicated forms, then this term, say if you go to fluid dynamics, if you drop a pebble, what happens? The fluid oscillates. Okay, so this term is responsible for that oscillation. Okay, so this term is responsible for this oscillation. Okay. Secondly, this term, as he was answering, this term is a phi prime term. So this term is responsible for friction. Okay. And this term is responsible for, I am not bothering about this term right now, I will show later on what does it mean. Okay. So this term is responsible for gravitational instability. So this is the source term, so to say. So what does it mean? If this term was absent, say suppose forget about, so why this is oscillation? As I said, I see some gloomy faces over there. They are not convinced. Why this is oscillation? Suppose you don't have these two terms. Then what is the solution of this equation? Phi double prime plus something into phi equals 0. That is an oscillation. Okay. So this term basically tries to oscillate, as Sheshadri was pointing out. This term basically trying to oscillate the baryon as a flamboyant child. Okay, but this term basically draws it backwards. This term gives it some damping. So that's a.
It's only an oscillation if the term in the bracket is positive.
Sorry?
It's only an oscillation
If this term is positive. Yeah, this term is always positive. You can check. Okay, of course, you're perfectly right, but this term is always positive. You can check from here. You put the, say for infidel, as you know. Yeah, you can check that H is basically too high over here. Okay, so time is also high. Okay, so just take that. But this is a good part, of course. So what I will say is that without this friction term, what happened? That the photon would have oscillated just like this. Okay, but here you have some friction term which basically drags it. So you have damped oscillation. Okay, so you have damped kind of oscillation which should look like something like this. The amplitude should reduce. Okay, why you have actually the exact picture in CMB, that is little bit complicated, I am not discussing. But at least in CMB you see that first peak is higher and the other peaks are little bit lower.
That becomes a little bit image of that.
Yeah, exactly. This is the background. You get the image in CMB. And background basically tells that you do have a damped kind of oscillation, which is called baryonic acoustic oscillation. Okay, what it tells is that you have this photon baryon fluid, and within that fluid, photons are basically oscillating, but not freely, they are basically getting damped. Okay, so that is basically being reflected over here. But even I can make your life even simpler from here. I can make your life, just hold on for a minute. Okay. Before doing that, let me discuss the tensor modes as well. Okay, so I have discussed just the scalars. Okay. So for scalars, we are convinced that we will have a damped kind of oscillation. Okay, first and foremost. Even without solving this equation. I will solve this equation explicitly. Okay, but don't bother about that right now. Okay. So what happens for tensor modes? Okay. For tensor modes, what happens? Okay. For tensor modes, what happens is that you have calculated del T mu nu. There is no del T mu nu for tensor modes. So all the delta mu nu are for scalar modes. Okay. So that means del T mu nu for tensors, that is 0. Okay. So that means del G mu nu for tensors, that is also 0. Okay. So I have already calculated del G mu nu for tensors. The right hand side is simply 0. Okay. You put that value, you will get the equation, and that equation will be HM double prime plus 2H prime M. I will explain from where I get that equation. Okay. Del square HM equals 0 for M equals plus and cross. So what I have done is that I have expressed for tensors, I have expressed del G mu nu. Can you remember that thing in terms of Eij bar? I have expressed that thing. Now as I said, Eij bar is a linear combination of plus and cross, two polarized states. So I can break that equation and I can explicitly write them like this, that is for plus you have an equation, so M basically runs for plus and cross. So for plus you have one equation, for cross you have another equation which basically just. Okay, so this is the same equation. I have broken that del G mu nu part into two parts and both of them basically satisfy this equation. Clear? Okay, fine.
And
So-
this looks like a scalar wave equation, so
Ah.
this corresponds to gravitation.
Exactly, that's it. That's the point. So I was coming to that point, but exactly that's the point. This basically looks like OM solution. Okay. So if you solve this equation, in principle, you can get gravitational waves. Okay. That's it. Okay. So its solution basically gives gravitational waves. Fine. So I have time till 4 o'clock, right? Oh, now. Getting tired. So, I mean, can you understand 30% of it? Then it is sufficient.
But it's, I mean, there is still a damping force, I mean, that damping term there, gravitational wave equation. So we can have that, whatever we gravitational wave at that time, in place then, so they cannot travel so far in time.
You cannot readily say that. To say that, you will have to explicitly solve it, see the time dependence along with the coefficients associated with them. What are the values? Because as we know, this H term, this is a quite heavy term sitting over here, so that will affect your solution. So unless you solve it explicitly, you cannot say. So what you are trying to do, you are trying to basically measure gravitational waves.
So
Okay.
we can expect that there are certain waves which are coming from the chambering, from the manipulation. So we can, if we have safely sophisticated equipment, then we can measure those things.
Yeah, of course, that is what people are trying. I will come to that point. So this is first step, as I said, I will basically discuss three aspects, okay, from now on. First is this part, okay. Secondly, the quantum fluctuation part, that is how I have shown that these perturbations will appear from inflaton. But how from inflaton you will get these perturbations, these matter and gravitational waves, that part I have not discussed. I will discuss this next. And then the final step, that to relate everything whatever we have done with observable features. And then I will show how much should be the gravitational waves and how much should be the power of gravitational waves, so that you can go and try to find it out in laboratory. And what people are trying to do, and I will try to give you an estimate of, and so what is the window right now? Even if people have not yet detected gravitational waves, they have succeeded in giving a window. And that is also quite a great achievement. I will discuss everything, okay? I will give you the exact numerical values so that you can be satisfied. Okay, you can satisfy yourselves that this is not just doing mathematics. Okay, finally you will have to estimate. And whatever Jayanti has basically told you, that is quite related to that thing. So, I mean, you need to do numerical calculation. So, you need to run codes in CAMP and Cosmo MC finally to do that thing. I will not discuss that, but okay. So, I will just give you the results. Okay, fine. So with this, what you can do, we have already confused ourselves. So right now, what we have done, if you are not bothered about the intermediate steps, what we have done, at least we can bring home this message that if we fluctuate G mu nu and T mu nu, what we can have scalar modes and tensor modes. Okay, those scalar modes, they basically satisfy a damped oscillation kind of equation. Okay, so that in principle, if you can get a solution of that equation, you will get damped oscillation kind of behavior at Laplace surface. Okay, and these tensor modes, they have an oscillatory kind of nature, so that you can guarantee that the solution of that equation basically gives you gravitational waves. So this is how matter and gravitational waves, they are basically formed from your initial homogeneous and asymptotic behavior. I have studied with homogeneous and asymptotic behaviors, mind it. And as I said, in Big Bang cosmology, hot Big Bang cosmology, you don't have any explanation of formation of these cosmic structures, you know what it is. But here you do have explanation. I am starting from initial homogeneous and asymptotic universe. I am saying that fluctuations basically take care of, basically you have quantum fluctuations of inflaton, and they basically take care of perturbations which basically appear as cosmic structures in CHE. Okay. So you do have whatever inhomogeneities you have starting from intersect first and foremost. You can convince yourself. Not only that, you can go beyond that. You can guess what kind of matter you can have. Okay, how will they behave? Just like matter behaves like a damped oscillation, and you have a gravitational waves kind of thing. You won't have anything else. Okay. In principle, you can have something if you try to solve these vector modes. I have not yet solved that thing. Okay, but that intensity of that thing falls much below gravitational waves. So that will be interesting once you can detect gravitational waves. Okay, so that's why people are not bothered about it. Okay, fine. So, but before going into that, before going into solutions and everything, I can, in principle, make your life a little bit simpler. So, what I can do is that I have those complicated equations, and I will just transform some variables, and I will make these equations look even simpler, and even with more insight. So, what I can do? I define a quantity. Okay. So I'm just doing some mathematical jugglery over here. I am not adding any extra physics. Okay. So what I am doing is that I had del G phi. Okay. I had del G phi. So I am defining a new quantity which is A multiplied by del phi. Okay. Plus Z multiplied by potential phi, where this Z equals A phi prime by H, and I define this quantity as a new variable. So what I have done, I have basically taken a linear combination of, this is not exactly linear combination, I am sorry. I have taken a combination of inflaton field and the potential, okay. And this combination I call a new variable which is V. Okay. So this is V and I call it Mukhanov. Why I define it like this? Because I want to make the equations look even simpler, and at the same time, those who know quantum field theory, they can readily identify this quantity just like this. If you have a quantum field, I am taking fluctuations. Okay. So those fluctuations, they can be, I mean, you can do canonical commutation and everything, you can expand it in Fourier series, I will discuss those things later. Okay, so that field is V. So the quantum fluctuation associated to inflaton, that is basically V. Okay, I will come to that point later on. But for this moment, what I am doing is that I am basically defining a new variable V, and if I define this variable, and if I put this variable into the matter fluctuation equation. Do you remember that matter fluctuation equation? Okay, you have oscillation term, damping term, so on and so forth. So if I put this variable over there, then the equation is remarkably simple. The equation will look Mukhanov-Sasaki variable, sorry, this is Mukhanov-Sasaki variable, and the equation is Mukhanov-Sasaki variable. Then that complicated equation looks remarkably simple. How does it look? That looks like V double prime minus Z square plus Z double prime by Z into V equals 0. As simple as that. I'll come to the physics part later on. Okay, and similarly, you can play the same trick with the gravitational waves equation as well. So for gravitational waves, if you define a variable u, which is mp by root 2 a into hn, then that equation also looks like this, just same with little bit difference. A double prime by A just that. And they basically contain all the information about matter perturbation and gravitational perturbation. These equations you can readily identify with what? These are any more information? So suppose if you had V double prime minus some constant into minus plus some constant into V equals 0, what would have been? That is perfect simple harmonic oscillation. So this is basically a parametric oscillator. You have V double prime plus m square into V equals 0, where m square is a function of that parameter. Okay, so these are nothing but parametric oscillators. So this guarantees that you will have oscillator kind of oscillators. Okay, so you can readily solve this equation. So even before that, you had an equation, you could not have readily solved that equation. But now you can readily solve this equation. You know the solution. Okay, so you can readily say that you have, yes, any question? Okay, so what you can say that you have parametric oscillator both for matter and for gravitational waves. Only difference, there is a difference for estimation that here you have Z double prime by Z, but here you have A double prime by A. Okay, this Z is not red sheet, mind it. This Z is this factor. Okay. So you know the solution for parametric oscillator, you have done kind of. Okay. That will be same. And these equations are called Mukhanov-Sasaki equations. Okay. So these two equations basically contain all the information about perturbations. So at the end of the day, you make your life more and more complicated, but at the end of the day, at least your life is safe. Are you happy? Now these equations are really tractable. But unless you do those intermediate steps, what I have discussed, you could not have got the underlying physics from there. What I call baryonic acoustic oscillation, etc. Unless you do those intermediate steps, you could not have got this. So this is all about this. Tomorrow I'll start with quantum fluctuations. Okay. So I'll try to show how from inflator you can generate at all these perturbations, and that will of course lead to same equations which look like this. Because this is the, so whatever I discussed, this is the effect. Tomorrow I will discuss the cause. Okay. So I will relate that cause to this effect, and that will give rise to same equations which look like this. Okay. And then I will try to extract. And so I'll try to propose observable parameters from that scenario, okay, which I will directly relate with whatever you get in CME. That would be this. Okay, fine. Okay, thank you for your questions. I see everyone is awake. Nobody is sleeping. That's a great achievement.